What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Occupy Fantasy YouTube channel. We're here today. UFC 267 card best bets, picks, lineup advice, DFS strategies, you name it. FanDuel, DraftKings, we're here. Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira, Petr Yan, Cory Sandhagen. Two main events, two titles on the line, 14 fights to digest. Jake and I are going to sit down here, talk about what these main events mean for your DFS lineups. We will talk about the newcomers on the UFC card, and then some fights and under-owned fighters that we want to target for our tournament lineups in DFS, and we'll close it out with our best bet. Let's bring him in. Jake the Snake, owner of MMA DFS.com. Jake, been grinding all weekend today. What's up, man?
Yeah, man, long week on these 15 fight cards. Well, now down to 14 after we had that one dropout, but long week and early start tomorrow. So crazy slate.
Yeah, so the slate starts at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And Jake, just knowing how things go, I'm pretty sure you had already written up that fight that got canceled before it was canceled, right?
Oh yeah, you know it.
Yeah, you can lock that bet in. Every time a fight's canceled, Jake has definitely already done all the research for it. So in this video, we already talked about what we're going to do 10, 15 minutes. Stick with us through the whole time. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get notified when we go live, upload any new videos. We're doing these UFC videos every Friday night for slates of 12 or more fights. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Give us a thumbs up if you like the UFC content. Any questions, comment on the video below. That's a little tougher for this turnaround because the slate starts so early on Saturday. Best bet to get your questions answered, though, is through our Discord server. Click the join button below the video, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. And again, for all the fight breakdowns, check out occupyfantasy.com or MMADFS.com. All right, Jake, so let's talk about the two title fights, Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira, Petr Yan, Cory Sandhagen. Give me a brief synopsis of both fights, what they mean for DFS, and how you expect them to turn out.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this Jan Sandhagen fight. I think this one's going to be a really high-paced, action-packed, up-tempo fight. Good chance that it goes the distance or at least later into the fight. So we should see, a ton of scoring, ton of striking. Jan's been really good at these trips. They go down as takedowns, but they're sort of trips where they just kind of kicks people in the legs. Sandhagen always has a shot, but God, this matchup doesn't get any tougher for him. So I really love Jan in this spot. I think he's one of the best plays on the slate. Cash, high risk, everything. Absolutely love Jan here. Sandhagen's always got a puncher's chance. In terms of the other one, I think that there's a better chance that the Teixeira Blachowicz fight busts. I feel like the last time we saw a Blachowicz fight against a grappler was against Souza. That was a really low scoring 5-round decision fight. I mean, I'm not saying it definitely plays out like that, but that at least shows the potential of how it could bust if, Jan's worried about getting taken down, Teixeira's worried about getting knocked out by the Polish power. So I think there are a lot more ways that fight busts than the Jan fight. I think the Jan fight's basically a lock where the winner of that's going to end up in the winning tournament lineups. So I think low risk is pretty simple here. I think you can just play all 4 of these 5-round fighters and then put in your other 2 favorites around them. Lock in 2 pretty solid scores. I even think that the Jan Sandhagen fight, even the loser in that, there's a good chance that they're going to score pretty decently and help your cash lineup out. And it lets you do a lot with the money left over after you put those 4 in. So you can build a really solid low risk DraftKings lineup in that regard. It's not quite the same on FanDuel, but normally we're focused on DraftKings anyway.
Right, with all the prize pools on DraftKings and the more contests over there, we're certainly focused. For FanDuel, you're really just you're getting both main events, but you're just not stacking because the way the pricing is set up over there. On DraftKings, we see this. We see the pros do it. We see the top MMA specialists do it, stacking these fights. Even when there's 2 on the card, most of the time they're stacking the 4 fighters from the 2 fights just because of 1, it guarantees 2 high-scoring players in your lineup, high-scoring fighters, and then it gives you 2 other spots because of the savings you get by playing the underdogs as well. So I agree with your analysis there, Jake. Really excited, looking forward to these fights. Definitely looking forward to the Jan fight. I think that'll be the more exciting fight to watch. And, for me, from a tournament perspective, on these 14, 15 fight cards, I'm trying to find reasons to fade these really popular fighters just because you have to take some stands in some spots. And normally you have to look to the main events for that. So your take on the Blachowicz fight potentially being lower scoring, slower pace. certainly has my ears perked up, especially on the Blachowicz side, because there are a lot of good fighters on this card with huge ceilings. Blachowicz in a win would have to get a couple knockdowns and an early finish, I think, to hit the optimal lineup, assuming these other fighters do what we think they can do.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, even if Blachowicz gets a knockout early, still a pretty good chance that he gets outscored by the other expensive fighters.
Right, exactly. So, all right, let's move on to the UFC Newcomers. We have 3 on the card, and I'm pulling up the MMA Occupy model at OccupyFantasy.com. Ranks every fighter, FanDuel, DraftKings with projected ownership. So we have 3 fighters that are making their debut. Jake, this is how we'll do it. We do it every week. I'll throw the name out to you. You give me just a brief background on their fighting style, their history, what their chances are in this upcoming fight, and what we think about them for DFS. So here we go. First one is Albert Duraev as a big favorite in his debut.
Yeah, man, I really like this guy. As soon as I watched him, I sent you a message earlier in the week. I was like, this guy's like Chimaev Light, right? And I feel like you were on the same page. And I guess it's Chimaev. I should probably learn to pronounce his name after a year and a half of writing this guy up and saying how much we love him. But yeah, so basically, Chimaev Light, dude's a Russian grappler. The only concern with him is he only has 1 fight in the last 3 years. That was on the Contender Series recently. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there. He had won some Russian belts, and then he just kind of took a few years off. So not really sure what happened, but he comes back, puts on a dominating grappling performance on the Contender Series, gets a takedown. I mean, I think he landed, I don't even know, it was like 50 or 70 or some crazy amount of total ground strikes in a fight that lasted 3.5 minutes. And then he submitted his opponent. So, I mean, it looked completely like a Chimaev fight where, you take him down, you beat him up, and you submit him. And he's, a similar Russian grappler. So I really, really like that guy. I mean, that's easily my favorite newcomer on the slate.
I think that's fair, especially when we consider the money lines of the other 2 guys. The first one we'll bring up is the Frenchman Benoit Saint-Denis. Give me a little synopsis on this guy.
Yeah, so Benoit is a French Green Beret, still a young guy, 8-0, has never been to a decision, has only been past the second round 1 time in his career. He's another grappler, doesn't have much striking, much tougher matchup here. He's going against the UFC veteran Dos Santos, who's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, also a good striker. Really tough matchup here for Benoit Saint-Denis, but he is a good grappler with a ton of submissions. So, his fighting style at least lends itself really well towards DraftKings scoring. So you never know. I think it's a really brutal matchup. Maybe he's a guy we look at in his second UFC fight.
And we always like those look-ahead spots as well, so I like what you're thinking there. Finally, we have Alan Nascimento, whose fights were harder to find than, some rare relics, right? Like, we're looking through Instagram tapes and dark web footage to find fights of this guy. He is a plus 275 underdog against Ulanbekov. From the limited footage you were able to find, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this guy has also only fought once in the last 3 years since going on the Contender Series Brazil when he lost a split decision to Raul Paiva. And his 1 fight in the last 3 years, which we found on Instagram, was like in like a small boxing gym. It looked kind of like an exhibition match. It went down as a pro fight, but hard to take away too much from that, So this he's kind of a wild card on the slate. Vegas doesn't like him. His line has gotten wider as the week has gone on. He's also got a really tough matchup, but he's basically more or less, it appears to be a one-dimensional grappler. Most of his wins have come by submission. He's going against, another Russian Dagestani wrestler. I think it's a really tough matchup, to excel as a grappler when you're going against a wrestler like Ulanbekov. So don't love the matchup, but I think for tournaments, you can point to the fact that Nascimento is kind of a mystery and bet on the unknown there. So there's some reason to play him, and he's going to be super low owned. So I get sprinkling him in for tournaments, but I mean, we really don't know what we're going to get out of him.
No, I agree. And that's what I had in mind too. The fact that we can't find much, which means our opponents definitely can't find, our DFS opponents can't find as much tape on this guy. We know Vegas is a little bit flying in the dark when they have guys like this. And to me, at least from the Contender Series fight, he threw volume, attempted takedowns. Like, that's all we can ask for in a DFS play. Whether he gets dominated because he's fought no one and was fighting in random boxing gyms in Brazil. Possible, more than likely, but at least he has some upside potential there if he's at least trying to do things in a fight. So I agree with you. I think he's a great tournament flyer. So, all right, let's move on. Fights we want to target. Before we get there, real quick, Jake, Khamzat Chimaev, you mentioned him a couple times. He is fighting again for the first time in a while. I think we have to bring up his weight cut. He missed a lot of time, even mentioned retiring after a long bout with COVID and dealing with a lot of repercussions from the virus. We do get him back in the octagon, and we're excited to see him back, and he's going to be very popular. But, you know, again, taking the bias of liking this guy aside, there's some red flags with the illness and the weight cut, and Vegas and ownership isn't cutting him any breaks. Like he's priced as if nothing had ever happened to him.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? Like even after the weight cut, like his line, I feel like we didn't see any move. Like if anything, it got even wider. But so he missed weight by like half a pound this morning, last night, whatever we're calling it. It was like in the middle of the night, East Coast time. He was the last person to weigh in. He missed his weight by a half pound. There was some like controversy of whether or not he was like using the towel to try to hold himself up. He takes the extra hour. He made weight on his second attempt. But obviously, that's always a concern. You know, it doesn't mean he's going to lose, but it's kind of an indicator that his chances are lower of having a ceiling performance. He's got his toughest matchup to date. I mean, he had kind of 3 cupcake matchups in his first 3 fights. Now he goes against, you know, a better opponent. It's not like the Leon Edwards matchup where he was gonna go straight to the top. Yeah. He had 3 scheduled fights with Leon Edwards. They all fell through. Now he gets a more reasonable matchup against Li Jingliang.
Nice.
Yeah, this is a tough slate for pronouncing names. I'm not gonna lie.
I sent you the pronunciation list before the show, and it was literally every fighter on the card. Like,
yeah,
there's some tough pronunciations. I think you got that one pretty good though.
There was way too many names on there. I just gave up. But I think because of all the red flags with Chimaev, I think that's a fight to target now, because you look at it and you're either going to get a typical Chimaev, you know, dominating slate breaking score, or the long layoff, you know, the COVID bout, the rough weigh-in. It's going to add up, and maybe Jing Liang, you know, knocks him out. I mean, you never know. I mean, that's what Jing Liang does. Like, he's coming off, you know, a round 1 knockout. I believe his last few wins have all come early. So at his price, you know, great tournament option if somehow Chimaev comes out and doesn't look like the same fighter. So, I mean, we're talking about fights to stack. I think that's a great one. And I mean, I love Chimaev still. If anything, I'm hoping that the weigh-in kind of reduces ownership a little. But my take on it was, all right, let's hedge a little bit more opposed to coming off our Chimaev ownership.
I like that. Totally agree. We're on the same page. And you said stack, but just so people out there are aware, we're not playing these 2 guys in the same lineup. But if you're playing multiple lineups, having exposure to both sides of the fight. Jake, speaking of that, right. You mentioned a couple other fights in the daily plug. Briefly, which fights are you looking to get exposure to both sides to, in addition to this fight for your tournament lineups?
So I think similar to the Chimaev fight is going to be the Durave fight, where I think he's going to come out and dominate, but he's fought once in the last 3 years. It was a 3.5-minute fight in the Contender Series. You know, maybe he gets exposed in the stand-up game. He's going against a guy in Kapleov who's had 1 UFC fight. Now, he hasn't fought in 2 years, but that's kind of the spot we're always looking at, you know, second UFC fight going against a debuter. Yep. So while Kapleov looks gross, and he was submitted by Carl Robertson in his UFC debut. And for anyone that doesn't know, Carl Robertson is a kickboxer who gets submitted every time he bends over to tie his shoe. So not ideal right there when you're going against a grappler. But at the same time, he can throw. He's got decent hands. He was undefeated coming into the UFC. And he's Russian as well, and he's trained in Dagestan. So maybe he's got better defensive wrestling after 2 years away than we realize. So I think that's sort of one to target. Again, you don't need much exposure on the dogs in some of these to have leverage on the field, and you can still leverage the favorite.
For sure.
And then the other one that we're kind of looking at that I feel sort of gross giving this one out, but it's the Petrosky Yao Zhang fight. And that one's just crazy for so many reasons, because Petrosky had the easiest UFC debut ever. I'm still not sold on him. Yao Zong has a massive size advantage. He used to fight at heavyweight, then he came down to light heavyweight. Now he's coming down to 185 pounds for the first time. He hasn't fought in 3 years. I don't know. There's so much high variance in this fight that's the primary reason I'm looking to target it. But Petrosky, dominating grappler. So if he comes out and does what he did in his UFC debut against a really easy opponent, like can't reiterate that enough, then he has the potential to score a bunch, and he's pretty, he's kind of in the mid-range of the pricing. And if he gasses out, like I think he might, then I think Yao Zong could be a really good tournament play. But Yao Zong he's not good. He's really bad. So, I mean, this is a super gross spot, but I do think you want to have more than the field on him.
Totally. I mean, and that's not even saying much, right? 7% on DraftKings, 6% on FanDuel.
Right.
We can very easily get that done. So, and again, if you're watching this video and you've watched our videos before, we find these high level spots, these macro spots, right? Guys making their debuts, guys off long layoffs, short notice fights, missing weight, moving up and down weight classes. Like, these add a lot of variance to fights, which if you're playing DFS tournaments or if you're looking for long shot bets, these are situations that enhance the variance in your favor. You just have to embrace it. So just make sure you keep in mind those spots whenever you're breaking down or looking at research for a UFC card. All right, Jake, speaking of tournaments, before we get out of here, give me your favorite tournament option on DraftKings, less than 20% rostered.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a guy that I'm normally not big on, but looking at this spot, I think kind of everything's aligning perfectly for him, and that's going to be Alexander Volkov. I think that he's going to go under-owned coming off the loss to Cyril Gane. I think Teixeira is going to be a popular underdog. And you look at Volkov, I think 4 of his last 5 wins have come by KO. Teixeira, his last 3 losses have all come by KO. I mean, it's going to be much more difficult for Teixeira to get Volkov down than the fights he's had in the last couple matches. So I really like Volkov if his projection really comes in at 18%. His price is at the point where you're going to have to play him over a guy like Makhachev or someone like that, where most people aren't going to do that.
Yep.
So I like that spot for tournaments.
Yeah, and I'm right in the same spot with you. And it's right above him, Ulanbekov, who, again, no one is definitely going to play. He's 9,400. Right, you could play Chimaev, you could play Makhachev up there, right? No one's going to play this guy. But again, we just talked about just complete unknown in Nascimento, right? He could be completely terrible. And seeing him at just 9% on DraftKings is always right up my alley. These huge favorites that are super unpopular just because of a perceived low ceiling. But when we get them potentially a completely mismatched opponent, that's when we want to take advantage. So both of our picks, Jake, are in the same vein of lower owned favorites. So because this slate, there are some underdogs that we can play, but none we feel confident in, none we feel great about. They're all relatively unpopular, and you're really just taking shots and hope 1 or 2 can win. So all right, so let's finish out the show with our stream parlay of the week. Jake, you put your best bets in the daily plug. You put your best bets on MMADFS.com. We're going to try to get this right. So you give me your first leg of the stream parlay this week.
Yeah, so staying on brand with my low-owned play, I'm going to go Volkov by KO at plus 150.
Volkov by KO plus 150. Okay, I like that. And I think this was a plug bet as well, right? Duraev in the first round, or first round sub, didn't you have?
Yeah, that should be in there. I think that's plus 320.
So I'm going to take that from my side. So we got Duraev first round, and we have, you said Volkov, right?
Yeah, so that should be plus 950 for the parlay.
I mean, by sheer nature of law of averages, we're going to hit a stream parlay here shortly. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, it's going to happen. Although on this time, watch, it's going to be like Duraev round 1 KO.
I know. Yeah, pretty much lock that in. So, all right, again, for all the best bets, make sure you check out the Daily Plug. Check out MMADFS.com, where Jake literally breaks down every single fight on the card, fighters' history, betting and DFS implications. MMADFS.com. Go check that out. The Daily Plug, which Jake writes at OccupyFantasy.com, gives the top plays for FanDuel and DraftKings, low-risk, high-risk contests, summarizes some of his best bets, and then specific lineup strategies on how to implement all of this for specific contest types in FanDuel and DraftKings. You don't want to miss it. Go read it. And that'll do it for the show. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when we upload videos, go live. Give us a thumbs up if you like the UFC content. For questions, hit us up in our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Click join below the video to get access. Follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. Follow me at Brian Jester FF. Follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate everyone listening. Good luck and enjoy UFC 267.